Hi everyone, this is our channel, Around My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
End of the world scenarios are presented in a lot of Hollywood movies: zombie apocalypses, alien invasions, meteor collisions, monstrous solar flares, premature ice ages, and worldwide deadly virus outbreaks. The last one is the one I used to imagine: a deadly viral outbreak that spread all over the world and wiped out humankind. My name is Rita, and I'm 21 years old. And as you can see from my introductory paragraph, I have an active imagination. I'm in my senior year at med school, on my way to becoming a doctor. My parents died in a car accident, which left me responsible for raising my younger brother. Our aunts and uncles lived in another city, so they couldn't really help us much. It was up to me to nurture good habits in him regarding food, health, and education. I had to find work after my parents died, so I got a job at the hospital, where all the doctors predicted that I would have a bright future ahead of me. One day, the hospital director called me into his office and told me that I had won a scholarship to study and work in China. I was so happy. I'll get to work and study abroad in a foreign culture, but that meant that my brother would have to come along. So, we went to China, and we got an apartment near the hospital I was supposed to work. China was a beautiful country. All the people worked diligently. The area I was in was exceptionally clean, and all our neighbors were very kind. China was one of the most powerful industrial countries in the world. The only obstacle I faced there was finding suitable food to eat. The Chinese people ate practically anything that moved: dogs, cats, snakes, scorpions. Ugh, disgusting. But when I heard that they ate bats, I threw up all night. During my studies, I knew that China had a lot of rare illnesses, but I never imagined that I would encounter any while I was there. One day, our hospital received a case with strange symptoms. After many diagnostic tests, we still couldn't figure out what the affliction was. The patient had a fever and a very bad cough. His respiratory system was in severe distress, so we put him in the intensive care. Shortly after, we began receiving an influx of patients with the same symptoms, a red flag that an epidemic was probably already on the way, and my brother and I were right in the middle of it. What a nightmare! Soon afterwards, my brother fell ill. That's where I drew the line. If an apocalypse was coming, I wasn't quite ready for it yet. So we left China and returned home. Thousands of people died in China due to that rare disease, but thankfully, my brother recovered fully and is now okay. As for me, I shifted my studies to seeking out a cure for this new coronavirus that broke out in China.
My name is Laura, and as a child, I craved unconditional love. But instead of cuddles and family outings, my lasting memories are of bitter rows. My mom never wanted children, she says. She told me that the only reason she didn't get an abortion was that she found about the pregnancy too late. My dad left when I was very young, which made my mother resentful. She had to stay and be the responsible mom, which she hated. On one occasion, my grandparents took me away, and I remember thinking, this is what family should be like. The relationship dissolved completely when I was a teenager. My mom's first love was always men, and when I was 15, she moved to Africa for a boyfriend without telling me. It's something I found impossible to forgive, especially as there has never been an explanation or even an apology. She has contacted me since, but always asking for money. That's why I made the decision to cut all ties with her. I put my mother's behavior down to a horrible upbringing, but she can't make the same excuses for her father. Dad had a lovely childhood, but he has no emotions or empathy for anyone. We haven't spoken in 7 years. Although she's so close to his parents and they encouraged her and her dad to repair the damaged relationship, it brought her nothing but more hurt. After he left my mom, he went on to have a new family. That was really hard for me to handle when he's made so little effort with me. My issues with my mom and dad have badly affected my mental health all throughout my life. I see a therapist regularly now to try to help me deal with the emotions. When I get married next year, neither of my parents will be invited. I grew up thinking I did something wrong for my parents not to want me. My only regret is not telling my dad how much I hated him. I don't hate my mom. I just feel sorry for her and I wish she could see what she's done. Ending all contact with a parent may sound extreme, but for me, it was an act of self preservation. My dad left when I was 8, and I haven't spoken to my mom once since I moved to Germany 10 years ago. She wasn't maternal and had a really bad temper, which she took out on me. She would never be affectionate, and I felt unloved. I believe my mother may have had a miserable childhood, which meant she lacked the emotional tools to be a good parent. After I grew up and had my own daughter, our relationship got even worse. My mother never came to see me or her granddaughter, but she did form a close bond with her son's new family. It hurt me that she made an effort to spend time with my brother's children and not mine. Over time, I have come to terms with the fact that she never loved me. I don't hate her or feel sorry for her. I just don't want her in my life anymore. Andy hasn't spoken to mom for 25 years, after they stopped communicating in his early 20s. For him, the problem was a lack of respect and common values. I grew up in a children should be seen and not heard household, where my parents' opinion was the only right one. We would have dinner in silence, and my parents never encouraged me in my interests or activities. He says he was never praised for his achievements, only criticized for doing wrong things. Whatever I did, it was never good enough. If I did well at something, my dad would always have to prove he was better. The house rules were strict, and he was sent to bed by 10 p.m. every night, even at the age of 16. But instead of sleeping, Andy found himself listening to the radio to escape the boredom. He quickly became interested in current affairs and politics, which gave him a new insight into the world. It made me realize that my parents' views were snobby, sexist, and racist. I was never allowed to voice any opinion that contradicted their views, or I'd be sent to my room. It made me lose respect for them. Andy and I were living in the same house, but we hadn't had a conversation for over a year. I can't say I regretted not making up with him. He was miserable to be around. Several years later, Andy graduated from university and bought a house. I was so proud, but my mom told me it was horrible. She said it looked like a council house and asked why he wanted to live in a slum. As his career advanced, she became more critical and constantly compared him with his half-brother. I was 21 and felt successful, but she was ashamed of everything I did because it didn't fit her snobbish ideals. Eventually, he stopped contacting both my mother and his brother, and has never looked back. It wasn't really a difficult decision to make because we had nothing in common and they didn't accept me or my life choices. Andy understands why some people see this as a surprising decision, but has no interest in sustaining a relationship for the sake of it. I feel like seeing your parents out of duty is wrong. If you have made no effort to build a relationship with your children, I don't think you can expect them to be there. For other families, the rift is a result of the parents' divorce. Like my friend Helen, she lost contact with 2 of her 4 adult children this year, after ending an emotionally abusive relationship with her father. Since they separated in 2011, it's been a slow process of parental alienation. Her son hasn't spoken to her since last year, and her middle daughter is now ghosting her on every channel of communication. She believes her former partner has used the same manipulation tactics on her children as those that destroyed their marriage. Once the kids got older and she developed her own life and interests, her ex became controlling and tried to stop her from doing the things that she liked. During a period of gaslighting that spanned many years, she says he told lies about her behavior to friends and family. Once he told them she was drunk and suicidal and she had gone missing. In reality, she had gone to the supermarket. When she joined a local band, he told everyone she was crazy and that she wanted to run away and become famous. Over time, her husband's side of the story was believed, and Helen began feeling alienated from her family. She sadly lost her mom a few years ago, and her dad is a man's man and took her ex's side. The divorce impacted the children big time and damaged them emotionally. Despite making every effort to build bridges with her children, she admits she doesn't know what their father has told them. He has always made an argument before parties and celebrations to prevent her from coming to the event. He also accused her of having an affair, even though she never cheated on him. The relationships with her two estranged children became so strained that she wasn't given a chance to discuss what had happened. The only explanation they've ever given her is that she doesn't care about them or that she treats them as little kids. Though losing contact has been an extremely painful experience for both of us, I don't blame anyone. Not me, not my mom, not Helen, and not her children. It's no one's fault. I can very much relate to how Helen's children felt. They're like goldfish swimming in a tank where someone keeps adding a tiny bit of color every day until they start to see things in a completely different way. I would love a chance to reconnect with my mom, but I can't see how it will happen. At the moment, I feel like I'm standing outside and they're inside a glass room. I really miss my mom, my brother, and definitely my dad.
With all the problems and crises that we face in our lives, we need someone to offer us support and encouragement, even if it's just a simple word. At least some acknowledgement of your suffering makes you feel secure in knowing that you are not alone, which makes you feel you have the power to keep going. But what if the opposite happened? You would sink into a deeper pit of despair unless you are exceptionally strong indeed. This is what my story is about. My name is Brandon, and I am 25 years old. My family was very poor. I was the third of 6 siblings. We suffered from poverty, humiliation, and near starvation. Dad had long ago succumbed to drugs and alcohol to hold his despair at bay. We woke up every day expecting to find him dead from an overdose. I was different than most of my family. I had dreams. I was determined to rise up out of poverty and raise my standard of living. I tried various jobs to earn and save money. I liked architectural work, so I began studying knowledge in this field. I saved a little money, but not enough to change my life yet. I began to take risks to earn more money. Risk, loss, gain. This was bona fide business. For me, sometimes I lost and sometimes I gained, but I always learned a great deal either way. Unfortunately, I neglected my health in pursuit of money. Remember I mentioned something about someone to support you? Well, that person in my life was Martina, my guardian angel, my friend, my neighbor, and my love. Every time I was about to give up, her sweet advice and encouragement would salvage my soul and lift my spirit. She would tell me that I must keep going to reach my goals. I wanted to tell her that I had done all that I had done just for her. Starting my company was her idea. I knew it was a big risk, but I trusted her to guide me. Initially, my earnings were low, but I learned from my mistakes. Slowly, I was able to save some money. Step by step, Martina was with me all the way. Finally, I became a successful businessman and gained a modicum of wealth. Eventually, I grew from one company to several companies and owned 3 or 4 cars. My brothers worked for me and had their own money saved in the bank. I bought a new villa for Mom, including a number of housekeepers. I was pleased to give Mom the better life she deserved. What's that, you ask? What about Martina? Did you imagine that I could forget about my inspiration and reason for living? No. We got married and lived together happily in a new villa. Despite all the problems at work, our relationship wasn't affected. I provided her whatever she wanted: money, clothes, jewelry. I owed her that much after all. I thought I had achieved my dream at last, but I didn't know that I had only set myself up for a very precipitous fall. My downfall began when I was in a meeting and suddenly felt terribly painful contractions in my stomach. As usual, I ignored my health-related symptoms, figuring that my mental discipline would overcome any physical weakness. All my energy went into maintaining the prosperity of my companies, but the pain didn't subside. As a matter of fact, it became recurrent and each time was worse than the one before it. Martina was worried and told me to go see a doctor. I was reluctant. Work demanded so much of my time, but she insisted, so I decided to put her mind at ease and go see a doctor. She, Mom, and my siblings are the most important things in my life. I predicted that the doctor would tell me that it was nothing to worry about. He would simply tell me to take 2 aspirin, drink plenty of fluids, and get lots of rest. So I went to a doctor who was a friend of mine. We didn't talk about my fatigue at work. He laughed because he knew that I preferred to chat and leave without any examination at all. He began examining me. I watched his face and saw his features go from relaxed to concerned to worried. He started re-examining my body parameters that he had already examined, as if to double-check something that he missed the first time. His look of worry grew deeper every time he checked something. I asked him if everything was okay, but I began to suspect what the answer would be. Once he finished his examination, he released the tension that had been building in his body. He looked me in the eyes. He asked me when I had begun feeling tired all the time. I told him it had been that way for quite a while. He was delaying telling me what he had found, trying to spare me from hearing the really bad news, I could tell. I told him to let it out, to be honest with me. The doctor took a deep breath and told me that I had advanced stage colon cancer, the last stage to be exact. He said that treatment wouldn't help at this stage. It was too late for corrective actions to arrest or reverse the condition. Then I broke out into hysterical laughter. "You must be joking, Doc. What do you mean by the last stage? There isn't any such thing, right?" I insisted. The doctor was holding back tears. "I'm sorry. I hated to break this news to you. I knew it would come as a terrible shock at this stage of your life with so much going for you." I was stunned, unable to speak. Martina came in. She saw our expressions and became worried and asked the doctor what he had found out. I told her it was nothing, but she knew immediately that I was lying. So I told her the truth. Strangely, Martina received the news stoically. She tried to reassure me that everything would be all right, that my health was good. She said we can see more expert doctors to help solve this problem. She was so strong, so confident, despite the shock of the bad news. But her facade of confidence belied a dark secret. I started radiation and chemical therapies in the hopes of a miracle happening. These treatments kept me away from work for a considerable time. When I finally returned to work one day, one of my trusted employees pulled me aside and said that he had to discuss a critical matter with me. He hesitantly told me that Martina was cheating on me. I smiled at him and said that he must surely be mistaken. But he continued, saying that Martina had made a deal with my lawyer. They spent a lot of time together and had signed a lot of papers. He said that a lot of things had happened while I was gone. He cautioned me to be careful. My health continued to deteriorate. I couldn't imagine Martina betraying me. The very idea was absurd. She was the reason for my success. Martina seemed to avoid me and seldom ask about my health, which seemed to reinforce the warning of my trusted employee. When I got home one evening, I told her what the employee had told me. She denied everything, of course. What did I expect her to say? She said that she was just conducting routine company legalities with my lawyer. I told her that I needed her support during my chemotherapy because it was so physically and emotionally draining. Then I asked her why she was suddenly so busy when she had always been at my side before now. Her veneer dropped, and her response shocked me. "And what kind of future do I have with someone whose days in the world are numbered?" I was speechless, so she continued. "I had to guarantee my future," she explained. I replied, "But your future is with me. I love you." "Love has no value now," she said. "Money is everything. I had the lawyer sign ownership of all your companies over to me. I own them now, legally and officially." I looked at her as if I were seeing her for the first time. It was incredulous that Martina would do such a thing. She said, "I'm sorry, but life is uncertain. You're fired. Now please go." I stared at her. I wanted to attack her, to strike her, to smash her greedy little face, but I couldn't. I was so weak from the cancer and the chemotherapy that all I could do was to stand there helpless and dumbfounded. So now I had returned to poverty with poor health to boot. I had lost my faith in people and lost confidence in myself. I was crushed, beaten, fallen. I didn't know what to do, but I was still hopeful that some miracle would happen, so I decided not to give up just quite yet. First, I had to recover. I knew a doctor who could perhaps cut out the cancerous part of the colon to extend my time on this earth a little bit longer. Unfortunately, the operation was expensive, and I was now penniless. I needed a plan B. I needed to get my money back, and I needed to regain my strength. I returned to my first small office when I was just starting out. I was armed with my experience and close relationships that I had carefully nurtured and cultivated over time. Would that suffice to start me over? So I began again, from scratch. Slowly, gradually, I rose from the ashes like a phoenix. My brothers aided me. My new company became self-sustaining. The next shock I received was from my big brother. He handed me a large sum of money that he and my other brothers had gathered. It was to pay for my surgery. He said they were all behind me, and that they expected me to pay them back with interest. Then he smiled. Family, that's who you can really depend on in times of crisis. I hugged him and cried. I had my surgery and spent some time convalescing in the hospital. In the meantime, my brothers were managing my company and investing our money wisely. After a while, I was discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health, and I was determined to get back every penny that my dear, accursed Maria had taken from me. I was so looking forward to making her regret betraying me after all the things I gave her and did for her. Months went by, and my reputation was restored in the name of my new company, and my loyal customers left Martina's company to deal with my new company. Martina had mismanaged her companies, and they now were in trouble. I took advantage of this situation and slowly began quietly buying shares in her companies to the point where I obtained 52%, a majority ownership. Then I blithely notified Martina that I now owned her companies. She was livid, outraged. I had totally blindsided her. She had never seen this coming. She had figured that I had been long dead. Then I blithely notified Martina that I now owned her companies. She was livid, outraged. I had totally blindsided her. She had never seen this coming. She had figured that I had been long dead. But I had survived and come back stronger than ever. I took back all my property and companies, and now it was she that was left out in the cold. She had no one, and I still had my family.
Hi there. I'm Andrew and I'm 23 years old. I'm a student in a medical college. I'm studying to become a doctor because it's my lifelong dream to find a cure for cancer. I want to save people's lives from the scourge of this disease. This war became personal for me when my mom fell victim to it. Mom fainted one day and we took her to a doctor who took some x-rays and diagnosed that she had lung cancer. Eventually, she succumbed to it and passed away. After that, I swore that I would find a cure for this hateful, evil curse on mankind. I began researching every book I could find on the subject, including old medical texts and foreign research papers and journals. One ancient tomb I perused mentioned a little-known, rare herb that grows high in the Himalayan mountains in China that was said to be able to reverse the effects of cancer damage. Heartened by this discovery, I set up a small expedition to go find said herb no matter the effort and no matter the cost. I completed my preparations and enlisted the help of one of my colleagues. The journey to the base of the mountains was tiring and difficult, and the trek up the mountainside was long and arduous. Once we reached the Tibetan plateau, we began searching for this rare, wondrous herb. We queried the members of a local nomadic tribe living there for clues. Luckily, their old shaman was familiar with the herb and told us where to look. Following his directions, we found it at long last. But finding it was only part of the battle. We returned home to my lab. I then had to see if I could extract a cure from it. The research and testing would take time, money, and effort. After months and months of experimentation and trials, suffering failure after failure, I ultimately achieved success by sheer persistence and luck. I formulated a cure for cancer in my lab. What a momentous day for humanity this was. I couldn't wait to publicize my findings in the medical journals and tell the world that cancer had finally been conquered. Then just 2 days later, I received a mysterious phone call from an unknown person with a gravelly voice who threatened me with death if I were to publicize my findings. I was shocked that someone would want to block a cure for cancer at the expense of millions of cancer deaths in the years to come. And so, here I stand in my lab, unafraid and unswayed. I will publish my findings, and I will let the world know about this miracle cure. If my life should prove to be the cost of saving posterity from the continuing ravages of cancer, then so be it. I will gladly pay that cost. Hi, I'm Kyle and I'm 24 years old. I've been a weightlifter for over 10 years. This sport runs in my blood. I used to follow the international players and imagine myself in their place. I had a fervent dream of becoming the world weightlifting champion. I've been working towards this goal ever since I was 13 years old. I've trained 5 hours a day for years with the ultimate goal of competing in the Olympic Games. I craved the fame and recognition that would grant me. One of my first early successes was winning a junior championship while representing my city. They called me the Tank due to my impressive strength. All the people around me foresaw a bright future for me. Title after title, contest after contest, my victories inevitably led me to the national championship. The winner of that championship would represent our country in the Olympics. I underwent intensive training to the exclusion of all else. I was so focused. My manager was confident that I could easily win the world championship, and I didn't want to disappoint him. The competition was fierce. I faced numerous fierce competitors, but I defeated them all and reached the final round. The only player left to challenge me was last year's champion, who had never lost a contest. The competition gradually got harder and harder until we reached the point where one of us had to break the world record to beat the other. A crucial tipping point came when I needed to lift a weight that was heavier than I had ever attempted before. There was danger in doing so, and my manager cautioned me to consider if it was worth the risk of serious injury to continue. But I was too driven to heed his warning. I had trained and waited too long for this moment. There's no turning back now. So I bent down and grasped the barbell. I sucked in a deep breath and lifted and heaved with all my might. As soon as I had lifted the weight above my head, I knew immediately that I had overestimated myself. After only a fraction of a second, I felt an excruciating pain in my backbone. A snap. I collapsed under the weight of the barbell and fell flat to the floor with the barbell across my chest, pinning me down. The pain in my back was unbearable. I felt as if I were dying. I was taken to the hospital where a doctor diagnosed that I had broken my back at the 4th and 5th vertebrae and that I would never walk again. I tried to kill myself on several occasions, not wanting to live my remaining life in a wheelchair. All my friends, and even my coach, gradually began avoiding me, not wanting to be associated with a loser and a cripple. My mom was the only person who stood by my side and never gave up on me. She helped me with my rehabilitation. Initially, the simple act of lifting a teaspoon felt like I was trying to lift a mountain. After 6 months of intensive physical therapy, a miracle happened. I was able to stand erect for a few seconds. 3 months later, I was able to walk slowly. I began a light training program to get back to my dream. Everybody was shocked that I was determined and foolhardy enough to try to do it all again, but I intended to achieve my dream even if it killed me, which it might very likely do. 2 years later, the scene cuts to Kyle walking out onto the Olympics weightlifting stage to the cheering of thousands of people. My name is Carl, and I'm 15 years old. I used to be the team leader of the school's basketball team, and I was proclaimed the best player on the team for the past 2 years. Unfortunately, I developed a bad leg infection and had to quit playing, so I became the team's coach instead. A player named Frank assumed the team leader position when I transitioned to the coach position. He and I were not on good terms. In fact, we were downright enemies. Our team, which had won many championships in the past, began losing games under Frank's leadership because he refused to follow my guidance. Some team members requested that I rejoin the team, but I told them that my leg hadn't healed yet. I was still undergoing physical therapy to regain my leg's strength. After a few months, I was well enough to start joining the team's practice sessions. The team players all hugged me and were glad to see me getting back into shape to rejoin the team. Except for Frank, that is. Frank was not pleased at all. I saw the hatred in his eyes when he realized I was going to come back and take the team leader position again. He said that I'd been off the team too long to be allowed to return to it as a team leader again. I told him that my infection was something that was beyond my control. He reminded me that there was a school tradition that one could challenge another for the team leader position by a show of bravery, which was to jump from a cliff into a lake below. So he challenged me to make that jump. If I could do it, then he would gladly relinquish his team leader position to me and give me $1,000 to boot. He was so confident because he knew that I had a fear of heights. He also knew that if I didn't accept his challenge, then I would be in an untenable position as far as all the team members were concerned, so I had no choice but to accept his challenge. He scheduled the challenge date and invited the team to watch the challenge. I was terrified, but it was now a matter of pride and dignity and a test of my mettle. My reputation was at stake. I arrived at the lake first, then the team members one by one, and then Frank arrived last. He handed the money to one of the players and said that if I couldn't make the jump, then he, Frank, would keep the money and remain the team leader. I went up to the top of the cliff and looked down. I had a moment of vertigo. I thought of backing out, but I heard the team chanting my name over and over and knew that I couldn't let them down. Their support emboldened me, and my fear lessened. I closed my eyes, screwed up my courage, and jumped. I had a feeling of having wings and flying through the air. It was only the blink of an eye before I crashed into the water feet first and went deep. Amazed that I had survived the jump, I began swimming rapidly upwards. When my head broke the surface, I enjoyed the delicious sight of incredulity on Frank's face. So I won the challenge, collected Frank's money, and was reinstituted as a team leader. The team's support gave me the courage to face my phobia and overcome my fear.
One nice thing about success is seeing all your friends and family being so proud of you and your accomplishments. This mutual respect and appreciation is what real friendship is all about. My story is about success and friendship, and also when two friends become incompatible and no longer go hand in hand. My name is Sherry, and I'm 21 years old. I had a friend named Margot. She wasn't just my friend, she was my best friend, my sister. She meant the world to me. We were alike in so many ways, even in our hobbies, our dreams. After my dad's death, Mom and I moved to Margot's neighborhood, since her mom was my mom's best friend. I was only 3 years old at the time, so Margot and I practically grew up together. At school, we shared the same classes, studied together, and even partnered as lab partners. She and I both aspired to become pharmacists. I struggled through high school, but made it through with Margot's support and encouragement. I didn't have as much freedom and independence as she did, because my mom was too overprotective of me. It was at this point that my story really began. When I decided to join the Faculty of Pharmacy, Margot asked me why I chose that major, and I told her that my dad had died of a malignant disease that had no cure. So it was my dream to find a cure for it, to save lives. I studied hard and successfully enrolled in the Faculty of Pharmacy. Margot was very happy for me, and she promised to keep me focused on discovering that cure for Dad's fatal disease that I so passionately sought. I asked her to stay by my side the whole time, and she was happy to do so. The Faculty of Pharmacy was located abroad, so outside my country. I would be independent, free of Mom's smothering control. Frankly, I looked forward to it. Margot and I found a place to stay near the faculty, at a youth hostel with a group of girls from different countries. Unlike me, Margot was able to easily make friends with them. Our studies weren't easy at first, but we worked hard and muddled through. I was so excited to delve into my research and learn as much as I could. I queried instructors and doctors constantly to expand my knowledge. This was my beginning, and Margot stood by me the whole time. Eventually, we graduated from the faculty and launched our careers. I started at one pharmaceutical company, while she started at another. We were now competitors of a sort. In preparation for my private research, I rented a flat near my company. Margot did the same near hers. She was always asking me how my research was going. She knew I was trying to develop an antibiotic to cure Dad's deadly disease. It wasn't easy, though, because the body's immune system attacked the antibiotic and destroyed it before it could destroy the diseased cells. I had to discover a neutral substance that the immune system wouldn't attack, so that the drug could penetrate into the body far enough to find and destroy the diseased cells via chemical interactions. My first research paper was rejected, but I kept trying, and with each attempt, I would discover something new. During that time, Margot was also busy with her work. One day, she called me. She was crying because she had been fired from her work. They accused her of stealing an important research. I told her that she was so proficient in her work that she should not be sad, but rather should try and get a job at my company. I told her that I would recommend her to my manager. She hugged me and thanked me a lot, and said, You really are the best friend ever, Sherry. The next day, I told my manager about Margot and said that she was looking for a job and was waiting outside. He interviewed her and gave her a job. I was so happy now. She and I were working at the same company. Margot continued asking me about my research, and I gave her occasional updates. I was hesitant to tell her too much, but then again, she was my best friend after all, so I invited her to my home to tell her about my research. Margot wasn't as happy as I thought she would be to hear about my progress, but I figured that was because of her recent firing. My personal research took all my time. It was even more important than my work. One day, when I reported to work, my manager told me that they didn't need me anymore, that I was being let go, fired. I was shocked and asked why. He said that I was spending too much time at home doing my private research and too little time at work. He told me he had had several letters delivered to my home, instructing me to come back to work, and that I hadn't answered him, and that I had failed to come back to work. He told me that my roommate, Margot, had received the letters on my behalf and had promised to deliver them to me. I was shocked. I told him that she never said anything. Returning home, I confronted Margot and asked why she didn't deliver my boss's letters to me. She acted so apologetic and said that she had received the letters, but she had been so busy that she put them aside and forgotten about them. I forgave her, but I felt that she wasn't being completely honest with me. I brushed it off and told her that being fired would simply free up my time so I could spend more time on my private research. Days later, Margot called me and asked me to come celebrate with her. When I asked her what the occasion was, she said that she had gotten a promotion and taken my place at work, my former job. I was happy for her, but at the same time, I felt that there was something wrong with these circumstances, and that feeling seemed to be growing. Time passed, and my experiments finally met with success. I had succeeded in finding the drug that could destroy the diseased cells. I was over the moon. Dad would have been so proud of me. I called Margot and told her about my discovery, and she said, "Oh, Sherry, you did it! You discovered the cure!" I told her that I planned to present my research to another pharmaceutical company soon, one that was better than my previous one, the one that had fired me. She acted happy for me, but had a strange look on her face. Then I felt sleepy, and I said good night. She said she would be staying up for a while, so I just went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I found my research area in shambles, and my research data was missing. I woke Margot up and told her that someone had stolen my research last night. She said that's not possible. Who else knew about your research besides you and me? And I said, maybe it was my former manager. Maybe he had somehow guessed that I had made a breakthrough. I don't know. I called the police and reported the break-in and theft of my research data, but they couldn't find any evidence as to who the culprit might be. I returned to my home country disappointed and dejected. I got another job at a company near my house. Many months had passed. I wasn't in touch with Margot anymore. We kind of lost contact somewhere along the way. Then, one day, Mom was watching TV when she suddenly saw a program that was going to discuss a new drug that would treat and cure Dad's malignant disease. They were going to interview the discoverer of the miracle cure. I sat down enthralled. I had to watch it. When the interviewer introduced the guest speaker, it was Margot. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was her. She stole my research. My so-called best friend betrayed me, and I had treated her like a sister. It cut me deep. I took legal actions against her and got my research back and received credit for finding the cure, so that was all okay. But the one thing that could never be fixed, for which there was no cure, was the former relationship between us. She had stabbed me in the back and destroyed my faith in humanity, and I don't think I could ever find a cure for that.
A love triangle can tear people apart, especially if it involves you, your husband-to-be, and your mother. Yeah, I know. Sad and complicated, isn't it? But let me tell you my story. I am Linda. I am 21 years old. I was a ballerina, and I loved acting on stages and theaters. I enjoyed all kinds of arts. They called me the butterfly because I was always supporting my colleagues and giving them positive energy. I didn't care much about love stories because I felt that none of the boys I'd ever met ever rose to the level of hero in my assessment. That is, until I met Ethan. He was an angel. handsome, educated, and a true artist. He could play music, draw, and direct movies. He was adored by all the girls on our drama team. And when he was assigned to direct our play, I ended up adoring him too. I liked everything about him. His voice, his speech, his manner, his style, and that lovely smile of his. One day, I decided to tell him about my love for him. He was working in the theater, and I asked him if he could excuse himself for 5 minutes so I could speak with him in private. He accepted, and once we were alone, I confessed to him, "Ethan, I think I love you." He was mildly surprised and pleased, it seemed, and he asked me to repeat my words again. I did, and he suddenly swept me into his arms and embraced me and said, "You are the answer to all my dreams, Linda. I have loved you from the first day I laid eyes on you." We began spending a lot of time together. One day, he told me that he wanted to meet my mother. I asked him why, and he said that by tradition, he needed to get my mother's permission to marry me. I was ecstatic and felt as if I were floating in the air. I rushed home breathless to tell Mom, who was not only my mother, but my best friend as well. When she saw me, she said, "So, someone wants to marry you, huh?" she said. Amazed, I asked her, "How did you know?" She replied, "I can tell by that euphoric look on your face and your rosy cheeks." Then she smiled lovingly. I invited Ethan to come by my home tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and I began counting down the hours till his arrival. At 8 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door briskly, he was standing there holding a bouquet of flowers. He handed the flowers to me, and I invited him to come in and sit in the sitting room. I went to Mom's room to hurry her up. Then I returned to sit with Ethan. Mom appeared at the door saying, "Hello, Ethan. Please forgive me for not greeting you at the door." I looked at Ethan. His eyes were transfixed on Mom's face. From that point, he never took his eyes off Mom for the rest of the evening. Even worse than that, whenever he would speak to her, he would just ignore me completely, as if I weren't in the same room as they were. And his looks weren't simply looks of admiration. No, they seemed to be deeper than that. I was both stunned and hurt. I had to struggle to suppress my rolling thoughts. When he finally had to leave and excused himself, he ended up not even saying a word about our marriage. Instead, he just promised Mom that he would visit her again sometime. "Ethan is so cute," Mom said after he left. Peeved, I asked, "Is he just cute, or did you like him a lot?" "I like him a lot because he will be your future husband," she replied, looking at me strangely. I was so jealous of my mom. Do you believe it? I went to my room and found a message from Ethan. "I enjoyed my visit immensely. I simply adore your mom. She is so elegant." I stabbed at my phone's touchscreen and messaged back, "Well, what about me? Am I elegant too?" He replied defensively, "Yes, of course, you are always beautiful. That goes without saying. I love you." Ethan spent the next few days constantly talking about my mom. He even asked me for her phone number. The nerve of this guy! I suddenly saw my love life crashing in flames and became so jealous of my mother that I avoid speaking to her altogether. Ethan was now speaking with her more than me. I began to argue with him over silly, trivial things. He asked me what was wrong, but I didn't answer him. I just gave him the cold shoulder treatment. One day, Mom and I were watching a movie at home, and I couldn't help but notice that she was receiving a text message every minute or so. She casually but subtly held her cell phone at just such an angle that I couldn't inadvertently read the text messages from my vantage point. Ooh, how I hated my mother at that moment. Suddenly the doorbell rang. She put down her cell phone to go answer the door. In that instant, I snatched it up and began ravenously scanning her message thread. From Ethan, "Your face is etched in my heart." I immediately took a screenshot and forwarded it to my phone. When Mom returned from answering the door, I showed her the message from Ethan that I had read and demanded an explanation. She seemed confused, then enlightened, and said, "Oh, okay, I can explain. Just calm down." I shouted angrily, "Explain what? That you two are lovers and I am a blind fool?" She replied in a sage, calm voice, "There is a misunderstanding here, and if you will calm down for just a minute, I can explain everything." Suddenly, I heard Ethan's voice behind me. He proudly held out a necklace to show me. It had Mom's picture in it, I was incensed, outraged. I said, "You have the gall to show me this necklace with my mom's picture in it? My God!" Confused and taken aback at my sudden outburst of animosity, he cautiously offered in clarification. No, she isn't your mom. She's mine. Look again." Stumped, I looked at the photo more closely. He was right. The woman in the necklace wasn't Mom. When I first looked at her, I mistook her for Mom. The resemblance was uncanny. He explained gently, "When I first met your mom, I was overjoyed. I felt that destiny had granted me not only a new wife, but a second mother as well. When I called your mom the first time, I told her that she looked just like my mother, and I asked her to please consider me as her son, too." I was shocked, speechless. Mom and Ethan were both crying tears of joy. "I am so sorry for my jealous behavior. Please forgive me for my stupidity," I said in a deeply apologetic voice. "Today is my wedding day, and I'm very pleased and proud to tell all my readers out there that my mom loves my husband and he her." And isn't that just the sweetest thing?
Hi, my name is Selena. I'm 19 years old, and I'm just crazy about basketball. I follow all the sports news, the star players, and the league statistics. I know the names of all the famous players around the world. My friends were amused by this because their interests ran more towards makeup, fashion, singers, and movie stars. I thought those girl things were just outright vain, shallow, frivolous, and downright silly to tell the truth. The college's basketball team coach was forced to take leave due to a chronic illness, leaving the team without a coach. Due to my high school reputation and widely recognized basketball expertise, I was asked if I wanted to serve as the basketball team's temporary coach. I had always dreamed of someday becoming a coach for a famous basketball team, so I jumped at the opportunity. School leagues presented opportunities for players to show what they've got and maybe get scouted by a professional league team. It was also my chance to start as a college basketball coach. By studying the opposing team's previous games, I analyzed their strategies and learned their strengths and weaknesses. I was able to excel and drive my team to an undefeated streak of winnings. We won the college league championship. I was selected to train a team in a professional league with another famous coach. It was an incredible opportunity for me to up my game a notch. During this time, I met an opposing team's coach named Jacob, who was something of a genius when it came to winning basketball strategies. He shared the same dreams as mine. He bragged that his team was better than mine. Well, I couldn't ignore the gauntlet he threw at my feet, so I challenged him to a game. My team against his, in the upcoming season, and may the best team win. If my team won, he would acknowledge me as a superior coach, and vice versa. The season began, and both our teams began beating all our opponents. I used these victories to hone my coaching skills to the next level. Both our teams were undefeated until the day we were to face each other in a championship game. The game began, and both teams played hard. We stayed closely matched the entire game. In the final few seconds of play, one of their players got past our defense. He scored a buzzer beat. I was crushed and began to cry, but my team's fans in the stadium broke into a loud applause. They began chanting my name, acknowledging that I have given them a great competitive, entertaining game. Jacob came over to me. I figured he came to gloat, but instead he got down on one knee and presented me with an engagement ring. I was in shock. The stadium cheered even louder. I may have lost the game that day, but for some reason I felt like a winner.
Every little girl is supposed to want to grow up to be a beautiful princess. How can you blame her? She grows up knowing that a glass slipper from the prince will change her destiny. She also knows that she may fall into a deep slumber only to be rescued by a prince's kiss. Let's not forget the fairest of them all. She manages to be loved for cleaning after 7 short men. Wow, the world we have created for our beautiful creatures. I watched all these cartoons. I imagined my prince choosing me over all of the others. I imagined dancing across the ballroom while everyone's eyes followed my graceful steps. I was the envy of every ball in every childhood fantasy. These fantasies were quite a contrast to my reality at home. Now, allow me to elaborate before you jump to conclusions. I had a fantastic childhood. From as young as I can remember, my mother kept my hair short. As a toddler, this meant wild red curls. The majority of my pictures were of me in funny poses. One with my father's big glasses, another with ketchup all over my face, and another swinging off a gate at our home. There are very few pictures where I'm sitting like a pretty proper girl with perfect clips in my hair. In fact, I remember always getting scraped and having yet another bruise on my knee. As I got a little older, my classmates had perfect pigtails and long ponytails or fancy clips. I remember looking at the flowing locks of hair wishing I had the same, but I had a boy cut. Yes, famously known as the Diana cut. Surprisingly, I looked nothing like Princess Diana. Instead, I looked like a skinny boy with bruised knees and short black hair wearing a dress. In fact, I once went on a strike and refused to go to the salon, so my mom was forced to grow out my hair. I think I lost the battle when I started looking like a philosopher with sideburns and thick hair on top. According to my mom, it was so I could enjoy being a kid, so I could run, jump, swing from the monkey bars without having to worry about a ponytail or braids getting undone. Finally, I started looking like a girl. Nonetheless, it was a long journey. I still was not able to do what other teenage girls did. For some reason, I was not allowed to wear lip gloss, blush, or mascara. Instead, I would get a face cream, some nice clothes, and I was sent on my way. This actually lasted all the way to high school. I finally put on eyeliner during senior year in high school and also experimented with lipstick. But by then, all the girls were way ahead of me. They had been putting on makeup for years. They knew what foundation, blush, concealer, and primer was. I was just getting started. There was no way I could catch up. After all, I just realized I could straighten my hair. So, I am assuming when you hear the scenario I describe, you feel very sorry for me. I sound like a plain Jane feeling like an ugly duckling when all she needed was a pretty set of pigtails and lip gloss. Well, here is the catch. I never felt ugly, and never even knew I was a plain Jane. I never felt like I needed lip gloss, and I certainly never felt like I needed any concealer to conceal anything, ever. Other than wanting long locks of hair, I was simply perfect in my mind. In fact, now that I look at pictures of the plain Jane, I'm so surprised about how pretty I felt inside. I only know that because I was able to try so many new things, take risks, and excel in so many different things in school that I must have honestly thought I was pretty amazing all the way around. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm simply analyzing how a plain Jane surrounded by beauty queens managed to be well-rounded, extremely confident young girl. I did see not myself the way I see myself in those photos now. Now that I know the power of concealer, blush, and eyeliner, I also did not see myself perhaps how others saw me. I saw me how my mother saw me. My mother never called me beautiful. In fact, she never called anyone beautiful. My mother only talked about other girls as smart, funny, classy, or confident. Thus, naturally, I started to appreciate those qualities in other girls and wanted to develop myself to be a girl with such attributes. Thus, in turn, others responded to me in kind. I thought I had it all, and knowing that I knew that, they believed it too. What a lesson for life. Beautiful was powerless to me. It was a word that had no value in my mother's eyes. It was a happy accident, and perhaps it was never impressed upon in my home. When I look at pictures as a teenager, I see the brilliance of it all. The calculated strategy of my mother imposed on me to help me gain inner confidence without relying on my exterior. In fact, it was not until I reached adulthood, mid-20s did I realize how others viewed me physically. It was through the eyes of strangers that I realized how much people really respond to and judge you on your looks. Luckily, I had blossomed from a plain Jane to someone who understood the power of makeup by then. It was actually a disheartening reality, especially when I realized that older women analyze the beauty of younger girls. Women are unnecessarily tough on other women. Perhaps it is because a lot of women have been victims of the cycle themselves, always feeling that they were not pretty enough. Just last week, my mother was casually telling me why I had a boycott when I was 4. It went beyond the fact that she wanted me to run and jump without hair in my face. She simply said, "You looked so cute. The short hair was part of your charm." How wonderful I feel even now to hear those words. My mother really thought that, even as a child, her daughter's charm was the most important thing. I have beautiful curls, and I let them run wild. They jump as I jump, and I can only hope I always feel beautiful in the same way my mother made me feel beautiful, by never saying it out loud. I do not panic. I simply take a breath, sit down on a stone bench nestled against some building I read about once, but can't remember the name of, and scan my cartoony tourist map for anything that looks familiar. But nothing. Give me a little credit though. Having grown up in a town with a population of just under 2,000 people, a town with a farmland and no streetlights, I am a country pumpkin who's been dropped off in a major city. I'm lucky I haven't wandered off the cliffs by now, only 2 days into my semester abroad. But culture shock is one of the main reasons I came to Dublin. So even though it is terrifying and unfamiliar, I know that living in another country for 5 months will definitely help me grow. As they say, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having the new eyes. The weather in Ireland changes quicker than a middle school crush. By now the sky has turned a shade of grey, and raindrops are beginning to spatter onto the map in my hands. I had been warned of the rain, repeatedly, before coming. It always falls softly at first, quiet as a page being turned, delicate as lace, but that's all just foreplay. When the wind comes, and it always does. It's no matter though. Studying in this city was one of my greatest desires, and I knew the weather was part of the package. Dublin was meant to be experienced in the rain. The streets are full of people. I wonder if they can smell the tourist on me. I've been in Dublin for roughly 48 hours, and it has yet to feel like home. Maybe it's because I haven't had time to unpack, eat a full meal, or even think. At one point, I was awake for 35 straight hours and learned that there is a little difference between delirium and insanity. To fight the chaos, I cling to the moments of serenity and hoard them like poker chips I can cash when things become too hectic. My most peaceful moment came on the plane ride here. The flight went by quickly. The wind was at our backs and the stars were ahead. As we approached, the Dublin skyline lit up like an artificial constellation. My heart was filled with promise, knowing that it would soon beat along with the city's pulse. And even though I have yet to feel at peace, my heart continues to say, "You will, you will, you will." The rain stops, umbrellas are tucked away, ready to be drawn when the moment calls again. I think a small part of me likes being lost. I know that if I really wanted to, I could ask any of the passers-by where I am or where I need to go. Everyone I've met so far has been so nice they'd likely offer me a ride there and a pint along the way, let alone directions. It seems strange by European standards, but the Irish people love Americans. And I mean love. They love Americans the way Americans love themselves. They want to know where I am from in the States, and what it's like there, and what brought me to their neck of the woods. All of it. And they really listen, absorbing every word and filtering them as willingly as if it was oxygen. There are bound to be some bad people here in Ireland because there are bad people everywhere. But with an open mind and a positive outlook, they're hard to find. Ireland as a whole is a country I've long idealized. Its postcards should be hung in the Louvre. Its culture is so rich. It is also home to my favorite writers, as well as my ancestors. I seldom contemplated my heritage before going abroad. Since I'm not of one ethnicity, I never had one predominant country to identify with. My family tree is like a European Union cocktail. Equal parts Irish, English, German,